It's ready. So that took a minute. Uh, but we have our terra sigillata ready to go. Now, our next step is to actually isolate the particles that we want to use. Now, we don't want to use the particles at the bottom, and we don't want to use the particles at the top. We want to get the Goldilocks particles right here in the middle. They're just right. To do that, we actually have to remove this top layer of water, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to decap our little food storage container here. I've got an extra little tub to dump it into. Now, what you could do is you could scoop it out, right, a little bit at a time, being very careful not to hit those smaller particles. I actually have a little syringe here. I use it for all sorts of stuff. And this is what I'm going to use to actually pull the water out. I'm going to pour it back in here, and we're going to get to our terra sigillata. So I'm just going to dip it in there and start pulling that water out. And largely speaking, you don't want to save this water for anything. You want to discard it, right? Don't push too hard on your plunger. All right. It has essentially soap in it and other deflocculants. And because we used a household soap, it should be just fine. The funny part is it's actually foaming up in the little bucket here. Now, if you get a little bit of the slip that's right here beneath, that's okay. Because you're going to have a little bit of extra. See, I got that right there. You're going to have a little extra of that. So, you know, it's okay to get that rather than to leave some of that soapy water there. So, here we go. Oh, somebody messaged me. So there we go. So now we're down to essentially those lovely little particles that we wanted, right? And that makes up our terra sigillata. Now we're going to use that. We're not going to worry about pulling off the bottom. We're just going to pull off this middle. So we're not going to dive down and try to pull the bottom up. Now, if we were doing this to keep like in a studio, what we would do is we would actually separate and pull these particles out, put them in a different storage, and hang on to them. For our purposes, we'll leave them right here, and we'll just be sure to pull off the top, okay? Good. Okay, so just to let you guys in behind the curtain a little bit, so to speak, this was actually the successful test pot for the ratios for the terra sigillata that we ended up using. Now, as you know, we're shooting for about 2 hours, maybe two and a half, depending on how long you want to give it. And you'll notice I started taking measurements at 20 minutes. So at 20 minutes in, the slip had settled down to about right here. After about an hour, it was about right here. And then after 2 hours, it was pretty much right there. Now, I continued to test it after about 3 hours. It didn't move much. From 3 to 7 hours, it didn't move at all. And this has actually been sitting here now for a few days. And you can see that it hasn't settled out anymore whatsoever. So this gave us a good earmark as to how long we need to wait before we can access our terra sigillata. Yeah, so that's how I came up with the 2 hour mark, right? I tested it. Okay, so I've got a pot I threw earlier this week. It's about leather hard, a little bit wetter than leather, but not by much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my terra sigillata and I'm going to apply it using a brush to the surface of my pot. I'm just going to brush it on. Okay, now once it's leather hard, you're probably going to want to put another layer or two back onto it. So you can see mine, it's started to change color just a little bit. So it's ready for another layer. So I'm going to do another layer on top of it and then come back. We may end up doing as many as 3 layers. But yeah, so a layer and then a layer and then a layer. Okay, so once it gets past leather hard, um, just past it, where the surface is starting to get just a little bit, well, it'll start to feel soft, right, when you rub it. Then we're going to pull out a very high tech ceramic tool. We in the biz call it a spoon. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the back of this spoon and we're going to rub it on our pot and we're going to burnish our pot. And what you'll notice immediately when you start doing this is, well, one, if it's not dry enough, it's going to stick to your spoon, and then you just need to stop and let it dry up some more. So if it starts sticking to your spoon, you haven't let your pot get dry enough. Um, Touch up wherever you've rubbed off and then let it dry a little bit. But other than that, the first thing that you'll start noticing is the surface is actually starting to take on a little bit of a sheen. You guys see that right through there? Now, over here, you could probably see when we started the video, it already had that. I had tested it a couple of times just to make sure that it was about right. So I'd rubbed my spoon on the back of it just to see if it was about at the right consistency, right? And I'm just going in a circular motion, and you can see it's starting to actually, yeah, you see that? It's getting a little bit of a mirrored shine there, you see? So what we're doing in doing this is we're actually taking all those little bitty particles that are just the right size and we're flattening them out so that they're all stacked one up against each other. Because normally that little fuzzy bit, that soft bit, is where the particles are all hanging off the pot in different directions. By burnishing them, we're flattening them all out so that they stack like that. And what that does is it means that the space in between those particles, this space right here, it gets too tight for water to go through. And so it's one of the earliest ways we could make waterproof vessels is by burnishing them with a terra sigillata. So I can just go over this now that it's nice and dry and just burnish it and I'll get this lovely mirrored shine. All right, so go ahead and burnish your pot. Okay, so as you can see, I finished burnishing my pot. It's shiny all over, very lovely, right? Go all the way around. Isn't that nice? I did have to go ahead and cover it with slip or cover it with terra sigillata a few more times. The spoon worked really well, and then I had this other very smooth thing. It's a water buffalo horn that I used for some of the incurves there. They worked really well. So you may want to change up, use a different tool if you like. The spoon worked really well for most of it. Go ahead and burnish your entire pot. Um, and that's it. Yeah, you'll be ready to go. Be sure to wash your hands, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next week.